Have you ever moved into an old house and felt like you weren't quite alone? Like the very walls were breathing, holding secrets from generations past? This is the story of Farhan, a young man who inherited his grandfather's house, a place steeped in memories and shadows. It was a beautiful, sprawling home, but it came with one very specific, very strange instruction. Taped to the wall, right beside a heavily bolted door leading to the basement, was a single, yellowed piece of paper. The ink was faded, the handwriting shaky, but the message was clear. Never open the basement door after sunset. Farhan chuckled when he first saw it. An old family superstition, he thought. A quirky relic from a more dramatic time. He imagined his grandfather as a boy, scaring his friends with tales of a monster in the cellar. He dismissed it, tossing his bags onto the dusty floor and setting about making the house his own. He spent the day cleaning, unpacking, and dreaming of the new life he would build here. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the house settled into a deep, unfamiliar quiet. As night fell, so did the temperature, and a strange stillness took hold. That first night, Farhan learned the rule wasn't a joke. It was a warning. It started at precisely 11:43 p.m., a sound that cut through the silence of the old house like a blade. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't a frantic, urgent sound. It was slow, deliberate, and resonant. A deep, hollow thudding that seemed to come from the very core of the house. It was the sound of something heavy and hard striking wood. It sounded like someone was knocking with bare bone. Farhan froze, his hand halfway to his mouth with a glass of water. He strained his ears, hoping it was just the house settling or a branch against a window. But the sound came again from a direction he couldn't ignore. It was coming from the basement door. Knock, knock, knock. He stood up, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. Every horror movie cliché he'd ever mocked was suddenly rushing through his mind. He crept toward the hallway, his footsteps silent on the old floorboards. The air grew colder the closer he got to the door. Goosebumps prickled his arms. He stood there, just a few feet away, listening to that dreadful rhythmic knocking. Then, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying. Just as he was about to convince himself it was his imagination, a new sound slithered into the air, a voice. It was a dry, raspy whisper, seeping from the thin crack under the basement door. It sounded ancient and frail, yet carried an unsettling undertone of desperation. "Let me out," it rasped, the words drawn out and thin. "Please, it's so dark down here, so cold." Farhan stumbled back, a gasp catching in his throat. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't the house settling. There was someone, or something, in the basement. The voice was filled with such pleading, such sorrow, that for a fleeting moment he felt a pang of pity. Who could be trapped down there? But that thought was instantly annihilated by the sheer impossibility of it all. He had been in the house all day. He had checked every room. The basement had been sealed, locked from the outside. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to his very soul that he wasn't alone. The rule wasn't a superstition. It was a containment procedure. For what felt like an eternity, Farhan stood paralyzed in the hallway, his mind racing. The knocking didn't return. The voice remained silent. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his living room, a lamp on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that bony knock, that pathetic, whispering plea. The next day, sunshine streamed through the windows, chasing away the shadows, and with them, some of his fear. In the light of day, the incident seemed less real, more like a vivid nightmare. He convinced himself he was just tired, his mind playing tricks on him in the unfamiliar environment. He even laughed at his own paranoia, but the night returned, as it always does, and so did the knocking. 11:43 p.m. on the dot. Knock, knock, Knock. This time, Farhan was ready. He sat on the couch, telling himself to ignore it. But the sound was insidious, worming its way into his thoughts. Then came the voice, a little stronger this time, a little more insistent. "I know you're there," it whispered from under the door. "I can hear you breathing. Don't you feel sorry for me? It's been so long. Just open the door. Just a little." Night after night, the ritual repeated. The knocking, the pleading. Farhan's fear began to curdle into something else, a maddening, all-consuming curiosity. What was down there? A prisoner of his grandfather's? A ghost? The not knowing was becoming a form of torture in itself. The fear was a constant, sharp pain, but the curiosity was a dull, persistent ache that was slowly driving him insane. He started talking back, first in whispers, then in shouts. "Who are you? What do you want?" But the only reply he ever got was the same desperate plea. "Let me out! Please!" 1 week after he moved in, Farhan reached his breaking point. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but the curiosity had finally crushed it. He couldn't live like this anymore. He needed to see. He needed to know. With a trembling hand, he approached the basement door as the voice whispered its nightly invitation. His heart pounded in his ears, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. "Just a peek," he told himself. "I won't let it out. I just need to see." He reached for the heavy iron bolt. It was cold, so cold it felt like it was leaching the warmth from his fingers. He slid it back. The sound echoed in the silent hall. Then he turned the doorknob. He pulled the door inward, just a crack. The resistance was immediate and immense, as if a great weight was pressing against it from the other side. The door flew back with shocking force, slamming against the interior wall. A blast of frigid, stale air rushed out, enveloping him in a cloud that smelled of damp soil, of decay, of something ancient and forgotten. It was the smell of an open grave. Farhan choked, stumbling backward, his eyes watering from the stench. The basement was a void, a pit of absolute blackness that seemed to suck all the light from the hallway. He couldn't see a thing. And then he heard it. Not from the basement, not from under the door. A voice, clear as a bell, spoke directly beside his ear. It was a calm, conversational, and utterly terrifying whisper. "You shouldn't have done that." Panic, pure and primal, seized him. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The sound was trapped in his throat. He scrambled backward, falling over his own feet, his eyes locked on the gaping black doorway. He saw nothing, but he felt it. A presence had passed him, a cold spot that moved through the air and into the house. He had let it out. The sun rose the next morning on a silent, still house. But something was fundamentally wrong. The basement door, which had been a source of such dread and mystery, now stood wide open, yawning into the darkness below. Of Farhan, there was no trace. He was gone. His phone lay on the living room table. His car keys were on the hook by the door. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air, but he had left something behind. On the wall beside the open basement door, a new message had appeared. It wasn't written in ink. It was carved, scratched deep into the layers of paint and plaster, as if with a sharpened nail or a piece of bone. The letters were jagged, frantic. It read, "Your turn." At the top of the basement stairs, investigators would later find his shoes, placed neatly side by side. They were still warm. The strangest part? Later that day, as the sun began to set, the real estate agent showing the house to a new potential buyer heard a loud slam. The basement door, which had been propped open, had shut itself with tremendous force. As she stood there, bewildered, a fresh piece of paper, crisp and white, slid out from the crack underneath. She bent down and picked it up. On it was a familiar, yet chillingly new message. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. It read, "Never open the basement door after sunset." And at the bottom, there was a signature. Farhan, thank you so much for watching. I hope this story sent a little shiver down your spine. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales from the shadows. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Would you have opened the door? Sleep well.